let us talk about the most anticipated releases for this year, shall we? And yes, I am talking about Happy Place by Emily Henry. At this point, I have read all of her main romance novels, Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, and Book Lovers. And so I recently got my own copy of Happy Place in the mail, and I could not wait to unbox that and make myself a nice little yummy coffee so that I could sit down and read this book. And let me tell you, I am terrified of not enjoying this because it is one of my most anticipated releases of the year, but in Emily Henry, we shall place our trust. Have reached page 50 of Happy Place, and I can already tell this is not going to end well for me because I am already too emotionally invested and Emily Henry continues to tug at my heartstrings. I have loved every single second of this book and the importance it places onto friendships and how valuable they are in your life, and how a lot of the time those friendships, those groups that you form, whether while you're in high school or when you're in college, can become equally as important as your blood relatives, as your family, or even more important for some people. And one of the first few quotes I absolutely fell in love with: "My best friends taught me a new kind of quiet, the peaceful stillness of knowing one another so well you don't need to fill the space, and a new kind of loud, noise as a celebration, as the overflow of joy at being alive here now." And it is so true. When I look at my personal friends that I've known for ages now, it is one of those things where we can be on FaceTime together for hours and hours and hours and not talk most of the time. We're just each doing our own thing. Or when we're in the car, we're just listening to music and there is no need to fill the silence, to fill the space, and not having to fear the silence in the same way that Harriet experiences in this book when you are with your friends is something that's completely invaluable in my life, because it makes me feel so safe. So the way that Emily Henry talks about those things, at least so far, is absolutely beautiful. And so essentially in this one, we follow a group of friends that met in college. Harriet, Cleo, and Sabrina, and each of them have their own individual relationships, whether Cleo has a girlfriend or Sabrina has a boyfriend, and then Harriet is engaged or was engaged. It turns out that the whole premise of the book is that she was engaged, but the engagement has been broken off for quite some time now. The friend group doesn't know. And so they go on vacation every single year. Harriet and Wynn, her ex-fiance, are keeping this big secret and nobody knows. And so it makes for an incredibly tense vacation. Another one of my favorite quotes so far is so unfair, but also so delicious, because I love to read about this shit when they're not together. The tension is just elite. Yeah, I got that. I'm talking about the rules. When we're talking about rules in any romance book, that's how you know it's going to be good. Do we touch? Do we kiss? He glances sidelong, a little embarrassed. Guilty. They know what I'm like when I'm with you. A very diplomatic way of saying they'll expect him to be touching me constantly, pulling me into his lap or hooking me under his arm or wrapping my hair around his hand and kissing me at the dinner table as if we're entirely alone, borrowing his face into my neck while I'm talking or tracing my bottom lip when I'm not. And the point is, some people live the bulk of their lives in their minds, me, and some are highly physical beings. When it is just so freaking good, and I can't wait to see how it continues to develop. And I am so excited to also see more of those friend dynamics in the group and to just see the alternating timelines that we get, because we do get the college timeline of things and then we get the current timeline, which I love when Emily Henry does that. It's the exact same thing she did with People We Meet on Vacation. So good. And I just know it's going to be super messy. I can feel it right here. My heart that's going pitter-patter. I can feel it. So I am here with my claw of the wide variety. I am reading Happy Place. Is this actually going to have a happy ending? Have I ever read an Emily Henry book without a happy ending? No. So is there anything to prove the fact that it wouldn't? No. However, I just... There's always a first time for everything. Maybe this will be the most painful one yet. The one thing I do have to say though is that the tension between these two people is absolutely delicious. I genuinely love the way that Emily Henry writes her banter. That back and forth, that tension, that very charged history between two characters that we get to know as the story goes along. The way that these two have me out here questioning my entire existence is real. I don't know if they're gonna get back together. I don't know what separated them. I mean, there are several things playing into the dynamics that could have potentially driven these two apart. There was a long distance relationship. There seems to have been a lot of issues with particularly Harriet's schedule because she is currently doing her residency at the hospital. And that seems to have put somewhat of a strain in the relationship. And so I don't know if there's more to it than just this. It's not necessarily incompatibility. It's just the long distance, the hours don't necessarily match up. It's difficult to obviously spend time together when you don't live in the same area, and that can drive a lot of couples apart. Also, can I just speculate? Does anybody else speculate in romance novels, or is it just me? Is it just me and my deranged ass brain? Maybe so. But why do I feel like all of the friends know? I feel like all of them know that these two are no longer together, and they've plotted to bring them back together. And I don't know if I'm wrong or not. I'd be surprised if this book is not a 5-star. This particular scene though, with the could be, would be breakup dress, if you know, you know, and the water bottle situation saying thirsty, he says dryly. I shoved the bottle back toward him, not anymore. And that is one thing I love about this book, is that subversion of the trope where we always see the main character, who is for the most part always female presenting, and we see them be very self-deprecating, very unsure of themselves. And while there is some sort of insecurity or maybe feelings of inadequacy based on what happened in the relationship, Harriet is not confident, you know? We see her be sort of this light at the end of the tunnel a lot of the time for Win in these flashback chapters, and we see her be very reassuring with whatever he's experiencing. And on the flip side, he is very self-deprecating. It seems like there is some sort of confident issue, also some sort of inadequacy playing into it, which is so interesting because we see him be that way in the flashbacks, and then we see her be that way in the present chapters, which with the dynamic switching, it makes total sense that they'd mirror each other at different points in time. However, I love the fact that we don't see, I guess, like the typical relationship situationship in which the love interest is always reaffirming the protagonist, and the protagonist's confidence is solely reliant on all of those reaffirmations. I love that that's not present in this book. It is very refreshing to see. Trust Emily Henry to give that to us. So very excited to keep on going. By the way, I didn't even tell you what page I'm currently on, but I'm on page 127. Emily Henry is driving me crazy. I am currently on page 219. I'm about to start chapter 21, which is another Happy Place chapter. I am absolutely loving the fact that they're matching the energy for each other. If one is being very, you know, we say in Spanish, bien cizañoso, you know, it's like if you're being flirty, if you're being touchy-feely, crossing the line a little bit, I'm going to cross it too, because it's an open invitation for me to do that too. And I just love every single second of that because the tension is so freaking high. And it's, you know, it's the shared secret of we know that we're pretending to be something that we're not, but our friends don't quite know that. Or at least they think that their friends don't know. I'm convinced that their friends know. I'm convinced that this is all a scheme for them to actually get together, like get back together and get married. I could be wrong, but that is my theory. We know that Sabrina in the story is very, not necessarily against marriage, but she doesn't really want that for herself either. And so the way that her storyline is going just seems a little bit too suspicious, if I'm being a little bit quite honest. And so in that regard, I'm suspicious. This book, as always, again, Emily Henry, speaks to my heart, to my soul. And there's always a point of relatability for me in every single Emily Henry book. And with this one in particular, just Wynn's perspective on himself in relationships breaks my heart, because it's something I've definitely experienced too, with feeling completely irrevocably inadequate in any dating situation. Not necessarily because you feel like you can't give anything to your partner, but because you feel like the more they get to know you, the less interesting you'll become. And that is a fear that Wynn has a lot of the time when it comes to his relationship with Harriet, his relationship with anyone really. He's been very open about the reason why I'm so mysterious and the reason why I don't like to talk about myself is because I feel I am more interesting as a mystery than I am if I am open and vulnerable and people can get to know me, because when they get to know me and I open up and I'm vulnerable, people leave. And that has made him believe that he is not enough, that him and his story, his background, who he is as a person, what he believes in, the way he likes to establish conversations and relationships is not enough for a relationship. And that shit absolutely broke my heart. That's when I saw the B-roll, that's when I started crying. I was not expecting Miss Emily Henry to drop that one. And I just absolutely love the way that I guess shows up in the story, and the way that he breaks past that fear to a point where he can be vulnerable and he can be honest with Harriet and with his friends and sort of switch the dynamics of everything. So I am, as always, in awe of Emily Henry. Love her so much. And now we go back to reading, but I'm freaking out. Have way too much hair at the moment. I need to cut my hair. I think this shot has made me realize just how desperately I need to cut my hair. Anyways, we have reached the end of the vlog, friends. Hi, I have finished Happy Place and I ended up rating it 4 stars. I really did enjoy everything about this book, save for the ending. The ending is the one thing that completely brought it down for me. It is just not my type of ending for, I think, any story. And so I think because of personal preference, I was just not vibing with the way that things wrapped up, and therefore I did knock a whole star for that. Save for that element of the book, I think everything else really, really worked for me. Emily Henry shows us as readers that romance books are not only about the romance, they are, I love that Vin's just grooming in the background, but romance books are not only, you know, about the romance, it's about how romance and love and friendships and relationships fit into people's lives. And I think a big part of this book, as, you know, an exploration to all of these characters that have known each other throughout decades. They have been friends for a really long time. They have been in relationships for a while. We see people who are constantly evolving, constantly changing. And so we obviously hear and see these characters go through many different situations in different areas of their life, whether it's in work or with family or with friends or in their relationships. And it constantly brings up the question of, when we as people are changing and we find ourselves in these relationships, friendships that span the course of years, how does our love and how does that dynamic evolve with us as individuals? And if it were to not evolve, or if there is no acknowledgement of the growth that needs to occur alongside our changes in our personal lives, then what would happen to the dynamic of a friendship or a relationship? And so we see characters that are either very welcoming to change or that are very hesitant and very reluctant to allow that change to happen. And I think in that regard, it made the characters extremely not only likable and infuriating at the same time, but also very human. And so I loved every single second of that display towards the last third of the book, which is when I think we see a lot of it, because we're actually having conversations now. I think the majority of the book is spent in this ether of not necessarily miscommunication, but withholding things in fear of facing the truth. Again, there's a lot of reluctance to face the reality of what things are actually like, because admittance, acceptance then leads to the acknowledgement that these things are real. And so we see a lot of that throughout, I'd say, the first half of the book. I'd say even 2/3 of the book. And then when we step into that last third, we actually see people having, yes, explosions, because there are arguments and there are fights, but we also see a lot of those very much needed conversations in order to see where friendships and relationships are at, exactly what the other person needs to be reciprocal, exactly what works or what doesn't. And that's such a huge part of any partnership, right? Boundaries are important. Talking things out and being straightforward and honest is important. And knowing that people will not stay the same throughout your entire course of knowing them is also immensely important. And so I think the way the book showcases that is absolutely awesome. We also see Sabrina and Cleo, who are a part of the, trio of friends, and we see their relationships too. We see Cleo with Kimmy, we see Sabrina with Parth, and we see their different dynamics, how they all fit together as individuals and as a group, and we see very distinct personalities as well, and different ways of dealing with situations and what that ultimately pans into towards the end of the book. Sabrina is a person who is filled with doubt, who is filled with feelings of inadequacy in the friendship, who feels like she's the only one continuously trying, and that nobody else quite shows up in the way that she does, and she feels like she's trying to hold this unit together, but instead of vocalizing that frustration, she withholds that, and instead she tries to show up maybe in an overwhelming way to people in a way that's not necessarily healthy either. And then we see Cleo, who's a person that values boundaries a lot. She believes that even though you are best friends with somebody, there are still things in friendship that you cannot say. You're a different friend to different people, and just because you do not vocalize something to your friend that you maybe would vocalize to your partner or to a parent does not make that friendship any less valuable or any less real, which is something that, other characters in the book don't necessarily understand. And then you've got people like Harriet, who are just so in their head, and she doesn't necessarily know if she loves her job or if she doesn't, but she throws herself into it because what else is she supposed to do at this stage of her life? And there is no questioning, there is only doing. And it is almost that plane of existence, of only existing and not really being aware of what your life is looking like, that makes you feel or be estranged from so many people in your life, that makes you feel and be so disconnected to the people in your life, that ultimately leads to where Harriet is at in the book, with not replying to texts and not replying to calls and really being out in the ether and not really replying to anything. It's not because she doesn't want to necessarily, or at times she doesn't. It's simply because she is trying to stay afloat in a very complicated life and world and everything. And so I love that each of them are so different. I love that also each of the love interests for these three friends are so different, and everybody has their own very distinct voice and motivation throughout the story. And so had it not been for that ending, this probably would have been a 5-star book for me, but everything else immensely worked out. Walking out of Book Lovers, which is a book I didn't necessarily adore by Emily Henry, but knowing that she put such a big emphasis now in these newer releases, maybe in comparison to her older ones, in highlighting everything else other than the romance as well, I think it was a good sort of mental preparation to know what to expect in this one, despite not knowing the ins and outs of the book. So that was lovely. So there's that, friends. That is the end of this video. I hope that you ended up enjoying it. I was torn at the beginning on whether to do it spoiler filled or spoiler free, but I know that the hold for this book in the libraries right now is immense. Had it not been because I have a physical copy, I literally would have waited 19 weeks in order to get this book from the library, which is absolute insanity. So ended up going spoiler free. I also think it's one of those books that's pretty easy to talk about spoiler free. So there's that. Hope you enjoyed it. Give this video a thumbs thumbs up if you did. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Have a Patreon, always linked down below in case you want to support the channel further. Have a podcast that I am going to get back into very, very soon. We have been trying to resolve my jaw issues at the moment, which is why I have not been able to get back into podcasting, because it is a lot of continuous talking. And so soon, I promise. But it is also linked down below in case you want to check out the episodes that are already out. It is called Talk and Talk. It is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Alongside that, all of my social medias are always down below. And there's that. Love you guys so much, and I will see you on the next one. Okay, bye.